Bless the Lord, oh my soul. Oh, my soul. Worship His holy name. Sing like never before. Oh, my soul. Worship Your holy name. The sun comes up. It's a new day dawning. It's time to sing your song again. Whatever may pass and whatever lies before me, let me be singing when the evening comes. Bless the Lord, oh my soul. Oh, my soul. Worship His holy name. Sing like never before. Oh, my soul. Worship Your holy name. You're rich in love and you're slow to anger. Your name is great and your heart is kind. For all your goodness I will keep on singing. 10,000 reasons for my heart to find. Bless the Lord, oh my soul. Oh, my soul. Worship His holy name.
Hi, everybody. Welcome. Thank you for joining us tonight. We were just talking a little bit ago thinking, well, either folks are going to join us or they're going to think, wait, this is way overhead. We're going to stay on planet Earth with this very important topic. And I think it's an important one that we talk about. And hopefully we'll get a lot of questions from you if we're not being clear and we're not being very understandable about this. So you can ask any kind of question you want to, and I have my iPad, Jerry has his computer there, and Steve is looking on as well. Marty can't be with us tonight. He'll be away this week, and we'll miss him. But let's begin with a prayer, and then off we go. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, amen. Lord Jesus, you are real, and you long to be personal with us. So personal that there is a relationship that we could have that could never touch the personal experience that we long to have with you. We long for it because it's possible. Help us to try to understand that, and let's help us to have the courage to root out everything that keeps us away from this mystical experience with you. Not just experiences, but an encounter with you that lasts and is always present to us in our lives. Help us to seek, all of us, to be mystics in this world. And then being mystics, we indeed will be people of transformation of not just ourselves, but of our world. So bless us tonight and help us to grasp this, seek it, long for it, and desire it. And we ask all this through Christ our Lord. Amen. So thanks, everybody, for joining us. And thanks, Jerry, for doing a lot of the hard work of putting together a lot of information we gathered to be able to talk about this.
Yeah, it's a great journey. It was a great thing to research. Of course, you pulled out most of the research. And I noticed while we were praying, 5 people quit watching right away. So they must be Marty's relatives. But 2 of them came back, though.
Okay, there you go. Maybe Marty's watching us.
Yeah, maybe. Okay. He'll be judging me.
I know.
Yeah. So anyway, well, this topic is something that can seem spiritually deep and a bit heady, but as we unpack this, we'll find it's quite easy to grasp. We're going to try to use regular language and
Yes, we will.
talking
We will.
about this, but it's infinitely necessary. I've learned from studying this for our journey, our faith journey, and a real intimate relationship with God. So even just the idea of a personal relationship with God is something kind of hard to get your head wrapped around.
Let me ask, let me say, is that, folks, as you listen to us today, is a personal relationship with Jesus something that you find hard to wrap your head around? And if you have any questions about that, I think that's a really good place to start.
Yeah. I mean, we've been cornered by evangelicals at the mall and everything. Do you have a personal relationship with Jesus? And really, if you're
And many
following,
Catholics do not know how
they
to answer that.
they don't know how to answer it. And I think if you're true to your faith and you believe the creed and everything we do all the time, you certainly do. So
Well, I think it has to be experiential.
yes, it is experience, and we're going to get into that.
Yeah.
So, well, let's start with a definition of the mystical and what a mystic is.
Well, I think my two great sources for that would be Rudolf Schnockenberg, and I have quoted this to you folks over and over again. Rudolf Schnockenberg calls a mystic someone who is a friend of Jesus, that you are in friendship, personal friendship with Jesus. That would be Schnockenberg's definition of that. Now, Rollheiser, he goes on to talk about this idea of being a mystic, and he says basically that a mystic is someone who, he says, thus there is an important challenge in Rauner's comment. We'll talk about Rauner's comment in a minute. To have a living faith today, one must at some point in his or her life made a deep private act of faith, that act which he equates with becoming a mystic. An act of faith is unfortunately itself very difficult because the very forces that have helped erode our cultural communal faith also works against us making this private act of faith. I don't think it's difficult in itself. I think we live in a culture that makes it difficult, and we'll talk about some of those.
Yeah,
things
we're going to
too.
get into that.
That's what
Yeah.
is that simple enough? Faith, it is. There's my definition of a mystic. You have a personal intimacy with Jesus, whereby he becomes your friend. I was talking to a theologian one time, PhD, and she was asked the question, "What is baptism?" And her definition of baptism, living out of your baptism, is friendship with Jesus.
Mhm.
That's what she said.
Yeah. So yeah, it's not hard stuff, folks,
It's not hard. Is it hard? Now tell me, is it that hard for you? You're welcome
to
to share
grasp.
some of that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Some of it can get hard in life, but
Yeah.
we'll get into that. So some of the people that we've heard of, we think of mystics, and
Yeah.
I didn't wear my cutoff fingers today to hide my stigmata in that.
Oh,
So let's talk about that a little bit and what's good, what's something to avoid or not get caught up on.
I think we got to get up with the idea that, first of all, mystics have secret experiences, that they have secret revelations, and now maybe one or two of them do. It's quite unique. Let me put it this way. Ruth Burroughs talks about it like this. She talks about lights on and lights off. Lights on, she says, are very, very few. Teresa of Avila will be lights on. And the whole reason why Catherine of Siena, lights on. She will talk about herself as lights off. And lights on people, there are very, very few of them. The reason why they have more mystical kinds of experiences with all that is because they're told to go out and teach this. Let people know what this is. John the Cross, in some sense, might be a lights on. We'll get to that in a minute. But she and every other, but most of us are lights off, which means we have experiences of Jesus. We have these experiences of God that affect us. We're not quite sure what they are, but something is happening to us that's changing us, and we're growing in our life of faith. And she would call that the average person has a lights off mystic, meaning that we're not like, for example, if I were to ask you, now there's this thing called the 3 stages of spiritual life, which would be worth talking about sometime. the purgative, unitive, illuminative, unitive stage. If I were to ask you, if you're honest, you're into all this different stuff, where are you? The average mystic would say, I don't know. The lights on mystic would know in some way, because they would, and the reason why they have lights on is because they're supposed to be teaching it in some fashion. Now,
Is it more? Would you say it's more structured
it's
in a way?
very rare. It's
Yeah.
very rare. Like Teresa of Avila would be a classic lights on. Now, Teresa talks about having visions and all this stuff all the time. And Ruth Burroughs has taught us in a way that Teresa of Avila, who is maybe about 40 years older than John the Cross,
Okay.
she was afraid of him.
Oh, really?
John the Cross was never Teresa of Avila's spiritual director, because she was kind of afraid of him because he was so direct. And he railed against visions, railed against these esoteric experiences that we think make somebody special. And by the way, Ruth Burroughs is going to say, none of those things make anybody special. As a matter of fact, they're dangerous because they think we are special. None of that stuff makes you, what makes you special in the spiritual life, lights on or off. Do I love God? Do I love my neighbor? That's the great key of a person. But most of us are these lights off version. We don't quite know where we are, but we know something's going on in our lives in that way. Then there's the lights on. Teresa of Avila, Catherine of Siena, Padre Pio, maybe in some ways. These are more lights on people, but they are extremely rare. But they're not the only ones mystics. A mystic is you who have a personal relationship with Jesus Christ, whereby he is your friend, personal friend, and you're in a relationship with him that's transforming you. That's the mystical experience, a deep personal act of faith.
So yeah, so it's something that it's really more practical and easier to attain. It could be frustrating to say, "Oh, gee, I'm not having these visions,
They're not
so I'm
meant
not
for
worth."
you.
Yeah, they're not meant.
for
Yeah,
you.
it's
And
the
they're not-
daily things
they're
that are
not
meant for
making you
you.
holy. Mystic visions don't make you holy. Mother Teresa of Avila talked about them. They didn't make her holy, and she even says that. What makes you holy? She would say your relationship with God is reflected in your relationship with your neighbor.
Yeah,
That, she says, what makes you holy.
yeah.
So don't get caught up with that stuff.
Yeah, so as we're unpacking this, I think it'll be evident that the miraculous isn't going to be the visions and the stigmatas.
no.
It's going to be what you encounter every day,
Every day.
by loving
Every-
what you're going to see. You'll see those
That's
miracles
mystical.
every day. Yeah.
Yes, yes. Now, Ruth Burroughs, who was lights off for the most part, I think, who understood in one level because she knew somebody she thought was lights on. She wrote about that kind of stuff. But there is a profound, Rollheiser calls her one of the great mystics of our time, and she was lights off.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Good.
Catherine or Teresa of Lisieux would be lights off.
Yeah. Okay.
She would not be lights on. She'd be lights off. Teresa of Lisieux, a little flower, never had visions, mystical visions on her.
Right. Yeah.
So.
She was just a happy person.
Well, she has kind of got it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know if I just call it happy.
Yeah,
She's
yeah.
got it.
Briefly, the mystical body. Then, since we're talking mystical, and somebody might ask this question, so can you describe the mystical body?
Yeah, I will. But when I get to Paul right there, real quickly.
Yeah, you want to address Paul's comment?
No, Paul. Men are just as likely to be mystics as men. Even though I mentioned a bunch of men, I did mention some men there. I think Thomas Merton was an absolute mystic, but I think he was more lights off with all that too. Merton would be a mystic. You're a mystic. You're
Yeah,
a mystic.
everybody's a mystic
Yeah,
if
no,
you're
we're all
if
called to
you
be
fall
mystics.
into this. So
again, please, please, please do not get caught up with all these. I'll say this, and women are going to rail against me on this one. Okay, I'll say this. Do more women have more visionary type things than men? I'm going to say maybe yes. I think women, and this is not a criticism, ladies, so don't take it that way. I think they have more of an imagination than men do.
yeah,
I think their imagination's much more developed. I could be
Yeah.
wrong about that, but I think by and large their imaginative powers are much greater than ours, but does not make men less mystical. I want to say that. So, okay, but mystical body, we're the mystical body of Christ. Beautiful term.
Yeah.
So we are, if mysticism is having this intimacy with relationship, we are, the mystical body of Christ is Christ present in our world. We are to become Christ in the world. And the church is meant to be that. That's the mystical body of Christ. Christ made present through us, the baptized, the confirmed, made present to the world. That's the mystical body of Christ.
Okay.
Yes.
Carl Rahner's credit was saying, the time is fast approaching when one will either be a mystic or an unbeliever.
Yeah. Now,
What does he mean by that?
I looked up the whole quote. The whole quote is this: the time is fast approaching when one will either be a mystic who has experienced God for real or an unbeliever. He was saying that the day is going to come, and by the way, it is here, where the culture will not carry the faith. Now, here's a little article that I have from John Ricardo. John Ricardo, big time person with Alpha. He's the one who's involved with Acts 29. Have you heard of that
Yeah.
organization? He's the one that runs that whole organization, Acts 29. He writes this: we Catholics need to recognize the historical situation we're in if we are to live our faith more fruitfully. And there are two basic kinds of situations the church experiences. Christendom, which is when a society is based on Christian principles and the faith guides the culture, politics, arts, etc. Watered down faith guides the culture. The other situation is apostolic age, when the surrounding society is oblivious or hostile to the church. We in America used to live in a Christendom society, but that's over. Although we may not admit it, and some who are old in their 70s like me or 80s, they're still looking to go backwards into the Christendom world, Latin Mass, all this other different stuff, ring the bells at Mass, and all this other stuff. This is going back to Christendom. And this new situation has consequences for how we engage the culture. So there are many people where we do not live in a Christendom world anymore. That is gone. But there are many people who are older that still want to go back to all that. They resist change. Many priests do not change in their parishes because they're afraid of the old people who are extremely vocal and want to stay in a Christendom world. Their church might be dying. There might be nobody in that church under the age of 60 years old. And they want to stay there because that's what they know. They don't want to change. We now live in an apostolic age where it says the surrounding society is oblivious or hostile to the church. That's in the world
That's
I think
us,
we live in
right.
today.
Yeah.
So I think, and that's when Rahner said, the time will come when one will either be a mystic, have a real experience of faith, or an unbeliever, is because back when I was a kid, the herd went to church. The herd doesn't go to church anymore.
Right.
The herd goes, and as Father Clemens said last week, he said there's a tipping point, and that tipping point has occurred. The tipping point was all of a sudden people were drifting away. All of a sudden, boom, everybody started drifting in a different direction because you hit that kind of tipping point. Now, if we hit that tipping point again, it'll all flow back in the other way. But we have to recognize where we are, which I think is the apostolic age with all that.
Yes, most of us were just following our culture. Our grandparents, our parents
Yes,
went, so
yes.
we went, and it's a good thing to do.
Yeah. And we really didn't have a personal act of faith. I didn't.
No, right, yeah. Neither did I.
Because why did I go to church? Because my mother told me to go.
Right, right. And I think and we see the church, see that as what's left over are people who truly want that.
Yes.
And it's going to be a smaller crowd, but then hopefully it's going to grow.
There
back
are
again.
two kind of people that go to church now: mystics and old people who are just cramming for finals.
Yeah. People in Christendom.
People in Christendom, they're looking for nostalgia. They're looking for a parish. Now, a lot of people, not a lot, some have left our Mother of Sorrows because we're not Christendom-esque alike enough. And so they're looking to go backwards, and they're looking for that. And so they'll die in that world, but so will the church around them. The churches will die. There's a certain point at which the church will not change until the older people die off, the very vocal ones.
Your brother Russ has a question.
Okay.
Is it harder for an introvert to be a mystic? Reminds me of the joke that you can tell an extrovert engineer looks at your shoes when he talks to you.
Looks at your shoes.
Yeah. No, when you're an introvert, you look down at your shoes, but an extrovert looks at your shoes.
Okay, okay. Is it
Or a computer
is it harder
programmer,
for an
Steve.
introvert? I would think, in one sense, Russ, it might be harder for an extrovert, maybe, but I do not think temperament has anything to do with this. I don't think temperament, like I'm whatever I am, with all that. So I would say temperament in my mind doesn't. Now, are introverts more susceptible to melancholia or even a kind of depression in their lives? Yeah, I think so, more than extroverts would be. But I don't know that it has much to do with the mysticism that we're talking about here, because there's both dimensions to it, extrovert and introvert.
Right.
So, a good question, though. Good question.
Yeah. So along those lines. I think I've heard.
Does that explain
Some of the
Ronner? Did we explain Ronner okay?
Pardon me?
Did we explain Ronner okay?
Yeah. Right.
Steve,
We're,
so how
we're,
we-
we're going to be going back and forth with Ron or even more
Yeah,
here.
what do you
So
think, Steve, with all this? I wanted to ask you, what do you think about all this?
Yeah, you kind of prepped me at the beginning a little, and I think it's just developing that personal relationship. And I think for some, as you said, it can be harder.
Why would it be harder?
I don't know. Like I said, I have an easier time, maybe because I'm more technical and have an easier time with the head knowledge, but it's the heart knowledge where, I think this fits in,
And you mentioned the word developed. What did you mean by that?
I don't know, just learning to, I don't know, see Jesus as your friend, and develop that relationship,
Okay.
It's an ongoing process, I think.
Oh, it absolutely is that.
Yeah.
It's an everyday process. As Father Clement said last week, you stop praying, you die. Of all this stuff.
and we're even going to get into that.
Okay.
We're
Okay.
touching all these things. It's going to get. There's a lot here, folks. Regard to this, I'm reminded of something that Richard Rohr said, that God has no grandchildren; He only has children.
Yeah.
So we each have to have our own relationship with
Yes.
our Father.
Our faith is deeply, deeply personal. It's a very good point. Our faith is deeply personal, but it's never individual. In other words, nobody is going to make it by themselves outside the church. Never going to happen. It's deeply personal, but never individual. That would be completely opposed to Christianity.
I might as well ask this. Matt has a question. Why do you think many young people are attracted to a more traditional liturgy?
In my opinion, or it's first of all that phenomena. The New York Times. You gave me that article in the New York Times about that, didn't you? Was that
I
you
know I
said that?
feed you some articles from there.
I thought you did.
You'll yell at me for reading it.
Now, that's an interesting conversation here for a moment. I think the reason why, and the ones I've met that are in this way, and there's a few that are exceptions to the rule here as I talk to people with all that, I think many of them looking for black and white. In a world that has many shades of gray, in a world that, in the postmodern world we're living in today, where institutions are falling apart left and right.
Right.
Just look at what's going on in our politics even today, with all this, with Biden finally pulling out. Everybody is kind of like, we're like on shaky ground. And I heard a quote from one, I was just watching for about a half an hour just to see what's going on. And one person quoted, he said, the Democrats are trying to, they're rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic. So that's not really good for us as Americans to be hearing someone saying that one of our major political parties is rearranging deck chairs.
Well, we do that at church. Isn't our church doing that? So, in a way.
As the one, I have a quote here. Here's a quote by Rolheiser again, by the way. And we're still trying to talk about your question, Matt. A friend of mine, Rolheiser says, a friend of mine who is somewhat bitter and cynical about the church recently remarked, what the Institute Church today is trying to do is to put its best face on the fact that it's dying. Basically, it's trying to manage a death.
Right.
And he goes on to talk about that the church is not trying to manage a death. The church is trying to manage an ascension. In other words, let's go back to Mary Magdalene. Whenever she met Jesus after resurrection, and she grabs him, And she says, don't cling to me, because the way I was before is going to be the way I'm going to be with you post Pentecost is completely different than the way I was with you before. Don't cling to the way I was. And I would suggest that a lot of the younger people and older people too, and it's a phenomenon that's happening in America more than anywhere else, there are people who are clinging to the past because it seemed safer. It seems to be much more black and white, and they want to be right in the right place. And I also think in many ways they don't like to deal with a mess. And we're in a mess in many ways. And that's not a bad thing, because when you're trying to change from what was former to something completely new, which is the whole mystical experience in life of the church, I think we're moving to a more mystical church. And that's that great quote from Schnockenberg, which maybe I'll throw that out there eventually. Right. May I even do it now?
Sure,
with
go
all
ahead.
this?
Yep.
He goes on to say, the Christianity will become a mystical religion or have no future. The point of departure, this is one of your questions, the point of departure for our understanding of Jesus is not that Jesus from above. The early church always saw the resurrected Jesus Christ. Or, as the theological fathers describe him, as the Christ from below. In our own modern theology, I think much when we're talking about the more humanity of Jesus, which we've lost in many, many different ways, and so we kind of have a way of overemphasizing. But he goes on to say, as Eugene Bizers goes on to say, but the Christ from within, who reveals himself to us from our mystical encounter with him. Christendom is now, and this is written a long time ago, so Christendom would have meant different things then than it is now. Christendom is entering its mystical stage, and the best paradigm for that would be to approach Jesus as your friend. He goes on to say that certain reservation with the term mystical, he says, sounds too mystifying, too mysterious, too esoteric. By contrast, friendship with Jesus recommends itself because it concerns our external contact with him as much as our internal relationship with him. So I think that's what's going on. And I think they're afraid of going out into the mess and like our accompanying, the church is always asked to go out into the mess. Like the first disciples in the apostolic age, they went out into the mess and they engaged the church. They bring the church out there. I don't see a movement in this whole traditionalist approach of going out anyway.
Well,
Yeah,
What do you guys think?
I was just gonna like a relationship, a mystic. It takes work. You got to be, like you said,
Takes a lot of work. And it ain't safe.
Right. You got to get
Jesus
out of the
isn't safe.
boat. You got to
Got to get out of the boat.
get in
Thank
the
you.
game. It's not just sitting back and watching.
Yeah, it's not having the right answer. It's going out into a world and facing people where you don't know what the right answer is sometimes.
right.
But Jesus is the answer somehow along the
Right.
way.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Matt added,
Matt, do I get it?
yeah, because this is, I was going to say something about this, and Matt's kind of leading me into it. I think that is a valid answer. Still, my nieces and nephews who have a personal relationship with Christ find their tradition or Byzantine liturgies as being in a place different than the world. I'm wondering
That's
if
true.
they're
That's
seeing that
true.
form, it seems mystical to them.
And the Byzantine is absolutely mystical.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It's meant to be, the Byzantine liturgy is meant to be, going into well, we claim we're going into heaven too. And I will agree that the Latin rite is less mystical than the Byzantine rite. And I'd agree with you with all that. And I think there are exceptions to the rule with all that. And I think there's a place maybe for that liturgy. But then again, the Byzantine liturgy and everything else too, do they understand what's even going on? Anyway, there's a lot of more questions about that, but I understand that. And Father Clemens, who's a young guy, he was saying he knows some guys who are deeply into Alpha. They are very much engaged in the life of the church, very much what's going on, but very much prefer the more traditional Latin rite. Yeah, that is true. That's true. What you say, there are those out there like that. Yeah. Maybe they're the more thoughtful ones in some fashion, and I cannot criticize that.
Yeah, right. Yeah, my thing is just when I'm in a Latin rite, it just seems
I can't.
I see. It seems like a lot of individual spirituality. It isn't like,
And that's true. because
I don't mean to sound critical,
good
but it's because that's what happened when we were little kids and we had the Latin rite. Everybody was fiddling with their rosaries and doing something else, and the priest was, and that was something that developed in the church. You know, Jesus didn't establish, you know, the apostles didn't establish the Latin rite.
No,
They're
they
doing like what we do now, really.
Closer to what we do
it just
now,
it
yes.
just got to that and got away from things, and
And that I think is a great way of criticism. It's like everybody's doing their own little thing. They're not really paying it. That's why there's bells, folks, because they didn't know what was going on, so they ring a bell. And so everything was individual, and you really weren't becoming a community. And I think that's what the early church fathers saw, the sacraments getting further away, the altar getting further away, and no one was reading the Bible. Our faith is the faith of liturgy and Bible. And by the liturgy turning around and being as it is now, I'm hoping you guys can say that you can experience the liturgy in a whole new way. God speaking to us a whole new way. Liturgy of the Eucharist in a whole new way. And the altar's right there. And then we can have this more mystical encounter.
right.
That's and so there's good and bad. But anyway,
Yeah.
I do believe there's
If you learn anything from this podcast, go to the Latin Mass and just be mystic.
it does not. I served it. I memorized all the Latin. It never really touched me much. So
Well, getting back on track here.
good
Eugene Beiser, maybe kind of highlight that again. We talked with the Christ from within. You were talking about
yes,
it's,
that's the mystical. Yes.
you know,
Now
it's not-
we've talked. So what we're saying, what Beiser is trying to say there, I think it's really important to say, is that this is a developmental stage. Mysticism's been around from the very beginning, but it was always by a few. Now, folks, many of us watching right now, we grew up, Jerry, whenever we were kids growing up, if you really wanted to be holy, you became a priest or a nun, right?
yeah, that's what the holy people did.
That's all
Then
I
the
did.
rest
All I did
of us just,
We're just the slobs in the mob.
yeah,
you know,
pay and obey.
pray. Yeah. Now, the church, two things. Number one, if I were to talk about the Second Vatican Council in one word, I would use the word baptism. Now, all of us, you notice the priesthood, there's less priests. You notice, where's the last time you saw a sister with a full habit on?
Right.
When was the last time you saw one? I'm not saying they're not out there, but I'm saying that they are a thing of the past. The thing of the future now today is the laity, all becoming mystics, all becoming what they're supposed to be, and the laity and the priests and the religious. I mean, I'm going on retreat this week. There's nuns up there, doing all this stuff. God bless them, and there's a place for them, but not the same place it was 100 years ago. Not the same place it was even 50 years ago. Now it is the time of the laity. And also along with that, now my aunt was a sister of St. Francis of Millville. I think she was a mystic in every sense. But now you're called to be that. I'm called to be that. Folks, people thought me as a diocesan priest. I remember I was in a seminary, one priest said, the diocesan priests are the armpit of the clergy.
Oh, wow.
And so, which meant, and I went home one time on break, my first year in the seminary, and my spiritual director had taught me how to pray in different ways. And he had taught me something that Thomas Keating taught was called centering prayer, which as I have grown older, I have grown to understand much more deeply than I did back then. So I go home and I talk to this priest, my parish priest, about a prayer and contemplation and Eucharistic exposition and adoration, different things. And this guy, I'm thinking he's going to think, Mark, you got it, man, you got it. He dismissed me in 5 seconds. He says, if you want to do all that kind of crap, you go join a monastery someplace. You're supposed to come out and build stuff.
Yeah.
I was shocked. I was so shocked. I left there like in shock. And I got back to the seminary and Father Anthony Minocchio, my spiritual director, I told him the story. He started laughing. He says, yeah, you're going to get that crap, but don't listen to them. And I never have.
Right.
And they're still out there. I don't listen to them anymore. So
You can do both. You
you
be
can
both.
do, yeah.
It's
you can do
necessary that
both.
you,
You can do both too.
right, yeah.
Yeah. Steve, you can do both. We all can do both. What's Betty saying here?
Yeah, Betty had a good thing. So, are we becoming mystical as we deepen our relationship with Jesus in liturgy, sacraments, praise and worship, centering prayer?
Yes.
That's
Yes. All of it.
on the road.
Yes. Betty, that's spot on. I think, yeah. Betty, by the way, I know you. You're a mystic. You're a mystic.
Betty's there.
You're a mystic.
Don't blow it though, Betty.
I like it. Don't blow it.
No,
All right.
no, Betty's all right. I got to meet Betty at St. Benedict's.
Yeah.
We can no longer rely on a culture that was once Christianity
Yes.
versus Christendom. I think we kind of touched
Right, we
on
kinda
that.
I kind of did that one already. Yeah.
So let's talk about, and we're into the whole longing here with Rollheiser. The moral loneliness that Rollheiser mentions. I get that we can expect to be lonely because we're even more separate from our culture.
I think that. And
But
yes.
aren't we also, we're estranged from society, but we can't simply roll with the flow of our own particular community, even our faith community.
Yeah,
You know, I felt like my walk is very different than Steve's walk and other people.
But I depend on you guys for your walk.
Right.
So whenever he said that, and he said that you can't even depend on your faith community, I depend on you guys a
Yeah.
lot.
Yeah.
My faith community is really important to me.
I get the loneliness part
But the
though.
moral loneliness he saw, yeah, I get
Yeah.
that too, because like may I venture into politics for a moment. When I watch the news and I watch the politics that are going on today, left and right and the whole thing, I feel lonely
Yeah.
because I'm not represented. I don't
Right.
see anything there that I, as a Christian, as a follower of Jesus Christ, can latch myself onto in any way. And so I have a moral loneliness when I listen to the left, when I listen to the right. I feel lonely.
Yeah, I've noticed that when you find yourself in the middle, your liberal friends think you're conservative, and your conservative friends think you're
You
liberal,
always
and
think you
so
have
it's
to make a choice between the two sides.
yeah, you don't go out to
And I
dinner with as
can't-
many people. Yeah, it can be very lonely, and it's not wishy washy.
No,
it's very.
no.
I'm writing an essay on that. I'll share it with you sometime.
All right.
But
All right. Very good.
it'll be a
Okay.
show. Anyway, we talked about in Nouwen's observation. Oh yeah, and Rollheiser's observation he mentions Nouwen's observation about the seminaries.
No, yeah, that's
you wanna
interesting.
talk about
That's
that?
a quote. Yeah, he says, now this is 25 years ago. Henry Nouwen, when did Rollheiser write his book? This would be back in this is back in my day, back when I was in a seminary. 12 years ago, while we're teaching at Yale, Henry Nouwen had already made the statement that even among seminarians, the dominant consciousness was agnostic. Now, I told you guys, God essentially has no place even among people talking about religion and preparing for Christian ministry. I told you I was in a seminary when I was 17. I would venture to say every single person in that place, maybe an exception or two, was agnostic, including myself. Jesus was not the center of anybody's life in that place. And in Mount St. Mary's, I met a lot of people where Jesus was the center of their lives. I hope it wasn't my case, but I knew a lot of seminarians where it wasn't the case either,
Yeah.
where Jesus was not the center of their life. Their dominant consciousness was agnostic, and I think that's true today.
Yeah.
I think it's true today. You know, I talk to priests. If you talk to priests about deep mystical things, they don't want to have a word. They don't want to talk about that stuff.
Right.
You know, so I think I think what he said is true with all that, and talk about loneliness.
Yeah, I kind of see the loneliness as, we all carry around our own bag of rocks, and as we talked about sin last week, we're not supposed to use the plural. Sin is just sin.
It's an existential.
And I thought of
experience,
this today. If 10 people on a given day commit the same sin, it's a very different sin for each of that person because for different reasons and so on.
Yes,
And so I think even sitting in church and being part of Alpha and serving with our brothers and sisters, I can see a certain spiritual loneliness each of us have apart from those people, but we come together for community. And can we talk about that?
I would not disagree with a word of that. That was, yeah, I agree with that to be true. Yeah.
So you want to mention the importance of community. So how does communal worship help all that as far as?
I think, and I'm just like saying communal worship. I can go to a church that has not been evangelized at all, and I can feel morally lonely in that congregation. They're not singing. It's kind of funny. We had 2 baptisms today, and I had people from both of those baptisms walk up and say they have never felt more welcomed. They have never felt more alive in church. They have never felt more like a friendly atmosphere where there are people together. So I can go to a church, and this one guy was going on and on and on about how if he even said hello to somebody in church, they probably, call the police on him or something like that. And he was saying that in his church, this was far from here, he feels lonely. He feels morally lonely. Now, a community can make you feel that way, and I can feel that way sometimes too. But when I'm amongst you guys, and it's more friendship together, and we're in this thing together, I don't feel that the community is important to me.
Right.
A right community is important to me.
Yeah, yeah.
So I think,
Essential.
yes, yeah, I would say that. Yes.
Rolheiser says that it's easier to have faith in Christianity than to have faith in a living God. Too often, what we have is not Christianity, but an ideology of Christianity.
And to go back a little bit to what Matt was asking us before, I do believe there's a certain, not always, but a certain ideology that goes along with the more traditionalist approach. But that's not the only ideology. I look at the evangelicals in many ways, and they're buying into the far right movements in the church, in the country right now. That's an ideology in many ways too. So what he's saying there, and in Catholics, I got people coming up to me and saying that, well, if I wear a scapular, I get to go to heaven. Like, where is that in the Bible again? Where is that? And probably it misses the whole point of what the whole wearing a scapular is, even to do all that. But the thing is, we have a lot of minutia, a lot of things that have been laid on to Christianity. And some of those things make it look easier. Than following Jesus is a lot more difficult because he takes you, he kind of messes with your life than just going to church. I think that's what that means. I would say it's easier to just go to church than believe in a living God.
Right. Yeah. Would you say, and if this is you, thank God you're there. Keep coming. But people in church, many people in church, that it is an ideology. Like Jesus is a good teacher. He's another sage, great wisdom and everything. But
And
really the
fits-
Son
if
of
it
God,
fits
and
their
is that
world,
Eucharist
if
really
it
the
fits
body?
their world?
Yeah.
They believe in what he says when it fits their world.
Right.
But I don't know the people, they know Jesus that well enough to be able to say, wait a minute,
Yeah.
that his teaching doesn't fit my world.
Yeah.
Because Jesus claimed to be the Messiah.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. He's
So
either liar or Lord.
let me ask you this question, folks. In our parish, let's say our Mother Sorrows and Michael's, in our parish, what percentage do you guys think would be in what we're talking about here are mystical? What percentage do you think would be mystical? Now, everybody that's watching us, let's vote, okay? Let's throw a bunch of them out there. I want to see a bunch of percentages. What do you think is the percentage of folks that you would see have mystical or mystical in the sense that we're defining it here today? Steve, what would you think?
I don't know if I want to touch that.
Yeah, I'm
I
a
know.
little nervous and you put me on the spot, but I think it's a higher percentage than maybe other.
Yeah, I don't want to compare us to other churches, but I get what Steve's saying.
I would say close to 50%, I hope.
Okay.
You have more intimate observations with more people, and
But there's a lot of people I
like
know.
I mostly go to 4:00 mass.
I know.
So,
But there's more people that I
oh, and those
I
50
look
people
at
that
them-
go Sunday
I
morning.
look at them when I'm thinking, what are they thinking? I'm looking at them on that. What are they thinking? I'm just
Yeah.
wondering what they're thinking.
And like you, now that I help, I've seen a lot of alphas, and
Yeah.
I think
yeah, yeah.
that maybe might be skewing my answer. I don't
I
know.
think if Alpha has touched your life, I think that is a mystical experience in your life.
Chris says she thinks half.
Chris, okay. Chris, okay. All right.
Chris the troublemaker.
Okay. That's okay.
Yeah.
Oh, that's we got work. That's good, but we got work to do, right? With all that.
So the deal breaker is to make a deep private act of faith,
Yes, that's the deal.
which
Yeah.
equates to becoming mystic.
Yes. And you can never say as an adult that I'm a Christian or I go to church because my mother did it. It's got to become your choice somewhere along the way. Your own personal act of faith. Yes, I agree. Yes.
Almost, yeah. There's like a point where you have people say, "Now, pray the sinner's prayer with me right now."
Oh, no.
But I'd encourage people. Would you encourage people though? They're listening to this and go, "I don't know if I've ever really done that. Just
I've
just
never
sit.
done it. I've never done it.
Just kind of sit down yourself and just say it. That or just kind of just imagine that. Yeah, I guess maybe I do, or realize I do. I don't know. I mean, you get to a point where you
No.
realize you did.
I understand the baptism of the Holy Spirit, the sinner's prayer.
Yeah. Oh no, that's somebody made that up. But I guess what I'm saying is that attitude of, I'm sitting here, I'm watching this program, and I never really thought about it before. So I'm going to think about it and just in my mind say, yeah, I am, or I'm not. And Lord, help me if I don't think I am. You know what I'm saying?
Okay, all right. I'm
Not a formal sinner's prayer, but I'm just saying,
I'm good with that.
I know sometimes I have to sit down and
that's
think
gonna be
about
my
where am I
prayer.
at on something,
My prayer as I go to guys, I go on retreat
Yeah.
here. Come on, folks. Chris, God bless you for
And
jumping
if you
in
said
there,
that
man.
prayer, send us $50 and we'll send you I don't know what we got to send. Anyway, so let's talk about the difficulties though of that move.
All right.
How communal faith works against us in our private acts of faith.
So here we're going to quote Rollheiser again here in his book, Holy Longing, and he does talk about different things in our culture that prevent us and which ones might you relate to. And I'll just read these off, okay? Our laziness, our self-indulgence, our ambition, our restlessness, our envy. I don't have what so-and-so has. A lot of envy out there, a lot of envy about different things. Our refusal to live life in tension. What does that mean? I think that means that oftentimes we're impatient with things. We're not allowing things to grow in ours, and we get impatient with things. Like right now, as a priest for me, I live in the great tension between Christendom, people that want Christendom, and people that want to go forward much even more quickly than we are. And there's a tension between those that really want to move fast and those who want to put the brakes on completely. We live in a tension in the church between the left, right, and all as the one book was talking about. We have the charismatics here, we have the traditionalists over here, we have the psychological version over here, we got the old school version over there, all these different tribes. We live in the tension of all these different things. So we have to learn to live in that tension, that everything isn't perfect and we might disagree about some stuff. We have to keep moving forward together. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I hope. Okay, attention. So our consumerism, that's a big issue. We buy stuff that we don't even need a lot of times. Our greed for things and experiences, our need for a certain lifestyle, our busyness, our overextension, our perpetual tiredness. If you ask somebody how they're doing, they might say either I'm busy or I'm tired.
Yeah.
They'll tell you.
Yeah, I didn't really understand that one. I mean, I get tired, but,
Yeah, okay, there you
but
go. Sure.
it's not that it's a sin, but I get it. Yeah.
Here's a big one too, especially for our young folks. Our obsession with celebrities and our perpetual distraction with sports, sitcoms, not so much, and talk shows, not so much. But sports is the religion of many, many people, even many that go to church. If there's a sport thing that I have to go to church, Jesus kick you to the curb, man, somewhere along the way. These are the anti-mystical forces of our time.
Yeah.
Anyone you want to add to that? Anyone you want to add to that, folks? You can add something.
Because all this stuff is on social media. I'm on the road a lot, and I'm just tempted to get into the YouTube and see other people's opinions on things, and that you could really go down a rabbit hole.
I'm sure you
You know,
can.
so it's like, okay, I'm either getting anymore. I've been turning everything off, or at least trying to get something spiritual on there. But
Yeah.
it's just, and maybe even some spiritual stuff. Too much of it all the time, instead of not just being
Just
quiet.
turn the whole,
the whole thing.
I rarely put anything on. I'm in quiet, praying a rosary or just being quiet.
Mm-hmm.
Every once in a while, I'll put a little bit of music on Pandora or something. But that's about it.
Yeah, when I'm driving down the road, I just close my eyes and meditate. You know.
I believe you probably do. Probably do.
No. Truck horn wakes me up. So, the key to all this becoming mystics, I think we're moving closer into the topic of prayer. Would you
Okay.
say?
Okay.
How do I become a mystic? Or how do I get strength to do this? So, how do we become mystics?
Well, again, real quickly, like Linda, I got to take,
I didn't
whether
see
they're
Linda's.
mystics or not, I got to take exception to you on that one. I think it is important. I think it's important to be a mystic. I think that it's important to have this relationship with Jesus Christ. If we don't, then we're outside of this experience that I think really takes us forward in our spiritual life. I really think, and maybe we're misunderstanding our terms. I think we really do need to want to be that. I think we really want to desire it. I think that is important for us. That's why, for me, the whole Alpha thing is so critically important, because I think the mystical experience, the personal relationship with Jesus Christ, in this sense, Christ being friend, is the foundation. It's the beginning point.
Right.
It's not add-on. I think it is the fundamental experience.
Yeah.
Come to me weary and find light burdensome, and I will give you rest. So I'm sorry.
Yes.
We may be disagreeing on the term, and if we do, but I apologize completely, totally. But I don't think we're talking about this as sort of an add-on.
In the beginning of Rolheiser's comments, just something struck me, and we don't really have to get too much in this, but there are several terms for prayer, of which can be confusing, even seem contrary to our belief systems. When he
Like-
talks about, well, playing Our Father, or saying
vocal
Queen,
prayers.
yeah, and Queen Mother, and coming up with just a name of whatever we think is God.
Okay,
That's
okay.
mentioned.
Rolheiser says in this part on mysticism, he's going on to saying that somewhere along the way, if you are called to we're all called to it, that somewhere along the way, prayer has to be part of your life. You must be a person of prayer. Here we are as Christians, we have our own unique way of praying. But even if you don't even say you are somehow, I don't know, a Buddhist, in the sense that you don't understand God in the same sense, you still need to have some kind of what he would call inner work in our lives. That's a very psychological, a Jungian term, inner work. So what he's saying is sometimes our words are used instead of word prayer, meditation, contemplation, inner work, soul work, active imagination, so on. But the essential idea is the same: to stay in contact with one's soul and to keep some health and balance there. We must have some conscious dialogue with God, a higher power, inner king or queen. That's a very psychological thing. A guiding angel or whatever we conceive. We got to be praying in some fashion. Higher power for AA. We got to be praying in some fashion. Prayer is essential, which I don't think we understand fully. That's where I showed the Brand Petrie stuff about that. And by the way,
Sometime.
we have about 9 minutes left.
Yeah, so we're not going to get to that.
So
As I suspected. So, well, actually, this leads us into Robert Moore, as a psychologist and religious philosopher, seems to have a practical observation for both religious and the secular, that if you don't pray, you will inevitably become either depressed or inflated. And at one point he says, or bounce back and forth between the two. You're either habitually depressed or obsessed with your own ego.
that is so true. Now, a lot of people in our world today are either depressed or they're inflated all the time. And what goes up must come down, and what goes down sometimes has to go up. And so this is a psychological term, but it's about the middle way. I have a person that asks me how I'm doing all the time. And I say, I'm okay. And he says, aren't you great? He kind of gets mad at me. Aren't you great? I said, no, I'm okay. Because it's sort of, for me, it's the middle way.
Yeah, right.
I'm not too high,
Yeah,
not too low.
right.
I try my best not to get way up there or way down there. I try to stay in the middle someplace, because I think that's where we meet life all the time. Now, sometimes I get up there and not the more I get down there, with all that. But I try my best. And prayer helps you not be inflated or depressed. I think it's a very wise statement on his part.
Yeah.
Does that make sense, everybody? I hope it does in some way.
And this is not as easy as it sounds. I know it was in my head whenever I wrote that, but
I noticed nobody has taken on my question about the percentages.
I was saying Chris said half.
Chris did, but and Linda did too. Linda, God bless you, did too. But it's okay. You guys didn't want to venture into that world. I respect that a great deal. Respect that. So that's okay.
I think Linda responded to you earlier about not agreeing with her,
Yes.
her statement.
I agree. I think you're right. So
Okay. Can you discuss Henry Nouwen's thoughts about time apart, keeping us centered even when it doesn't feel like we're praying or making headway? There's that interesting paragraph where I just thought people might get a little bit of, you have to read the paragraph,
I'm
but I was
almost
thinking,
afraid to say that stuff because people expect prayer to be prayer is simple, but it's not easy. And we all worried about these D things called distractions all the time. And I'd like to talk more about that. I'm afraid to discourage everybody by saying there are such a thing as distractions. There are such a thing as he says, inner restlessness, sleepiness.
well, I just feel like you feel like you're somewhat normal. You're not, you don't have a chance at being a saint because I'm trying to pray and all of a sudden I'm thinking about the dishwasher or something. That's just normal.
I'd love to talk about that stuff.
Yeah.
I'd love to do that. I don't know if this is the forum for it. As a matter of fact, maybe once Babette's over,
Yeah.
I'm gonna do a little class before on prayer. I want to do a little class on prayer.
Well, we have a lot to cover on prayer that we're not going to get to today.
know.
So I think we'll do a
Meditation,
show on that.
contemplation,
Yeah, we're
and
going
maybe
to.
we'll do so. That'd be
Yeah.
good. And then we'll do the same thing. We'll do that as soon as Babette's over.
Yeah, in
We'll
fact,
do a little class on prayer.
we're not going to get to where we were going to get before we didn't get to that. So we're this is a good. This will continue if you want. This is
So I hope in many ways we have been understandable. Can you give me a up or down on that one? Are we understandable with all that? Let me know what you think. When someone
Carol
asks
Paoli.
me how I am, I respond by saying I'm on the right side of the
yeah,
grass.
yeah.
That's a good one.
I like that.
Even though sometimes I wouldn't mind being on the other side of the grass because
Yeah.
I'd be seeing Jesus face to face.
That's
at
right.
that
yeah,
point. So
yeah. So mysticism, it isn't just about prayer practice,
No,
prayer
no,
and
no,
practices,
no.
and seeking God through
but it
prayer.
requires a prayer practice.
Yes.
It requires one. A daily prayer practice requires one. And as the practicing the way, the book, he would say it requires a rule of life, which we could talk about that too sometime, but that's a very good thing, very important thing.
I mean, real mysticism, we're actively loving, right?
Yes, we are engaged. You are engaged in active mysticism. You are engaged in your life. You are full of your life. Everything is going on in your life. You're full of life in mysticism, your life. And by the way, Jerry, if we have one more thing, I just want to do a little commercial here before.
Maybe we should do that because we're at a good spot to lead into, to keep going if they want to tune in
Yeah.
in 3 weeks.
And we'll do more of this. We'll talk more about that carrying the tension stuff too. I think
Yeah, that's
the
good
next thing
stuff.
on your
That's
thing
real
here.
important.
But we're not going to be here next week. This is our usual time off. And then we're going to come back the beginning of August. I don't know exactly what we're going to do because Jerry has thoughts about what we should be doing.
Well, we can finish this.
And we could do more about this and talk more about prayer. And we never finished the section on the sacraments
Do that,
and
yeah.
the two parts of marriage and holy orders, which are trying to do the same thing. So those things are other things we can do, but we can also talk more and more about this here too. And I don't know what you guys think might be better.
Father, you said 2 weeks off, correct?
1 week.
Well,
Nope.
the picnic.
It's
we-
right,
we
the
are
picnic.
taking 2 weeks,
the
so we'll be-
picnic's after
it'll be
that, so
3
it'll be
weeks till we get
2
back.
weeks. Yeah, it'll be 2 weeks we're off.
But we had a lot of comments that people want us to continue on this topic, it looks like.
Okay. This is a
If
very
anything from my
challenging
cousin
business.
Joan, she wants to keep going. So doggone it,
Okay. Is
Joan.
this Russ or is that Susie really saying that? It's a great challenge to be a mystic.
Yeah.
It is a challenge. What a beautiful thing. And we're all called to it. We're all called to it. And I want to say that if you don't become a mystic on some level, you've missed the meaning of your life. And I really mean that. In our understanding now of what a mystic is, it's going to be a paradigm shift in some sense of what we're saying a mystic is for all of us. So anyway, anything else, Jerry, you want to say?
No, because we would have to get into the weeds in something
Anything else we
completely
just
new.
talked about? Any wrap up comments?
No, I just think
Are we talking
I
about
think
great
it's
stuff?
it's so much. I think it's what our faith journey is all about. I mean,
Yes,
and
I
it's
think it is.
and it's very freeing. It's like, okay, well, the mystical side, if we concentrate on that, at least we have something to focus on towards Jesus.
This is the great adventure of life.
Yeah.
This is the great adventure to be this.
Yeah.
So, and you have a great book over there from Jacques Philippe called Time for
Time for
God,
God.
which would be worth your while. The Jacques Philippe's
Yeah,
book on
It's a
prayer.
little book. It's 110 pages or so.
Yeah, it's
And,
very clear.
yeah, very clear. Very good.
Yeah. So anyway, Steve, any other final thoughts?
Nope. I think it's worth continuing for sure.
All right. Okay. So we'll talk more about these different things. So thank you for joining us. I really appreciate it. And tell your friends about us in some way so that maybe we can continue. And if you have any comments outside of here, please talk to any of us and we'll talk about anything you guys want to talk about. We'll continue this and any thoughts you have about what we talked about so far. Thank you very much for joining us for this version of 100. What does that say up there?
111.
Wow, how time goes.
Wow. Yeah.
111. I remember when we had 100.
Yeah.
Not that long ago.
So call that number at the bottom of your screen and donate to keep this ministry going.
And as you notice, there's no
There's
phone number.
There is no phone number. So
There's no
people
phone.
know I'm full of you know what. So.
All right. Thank you for watching us. Goodbye now.